I will say that I'm an eternal optimist. Optimistic to a fault, Enneagram 7 the whole way. Like, it's going to be better tomorrow. It's fine. However, I will say that there have been plenty of times where the struggle is real. You know what I mean? And especially, I think about big decisions.
Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with Lauren Isbell. Lauren, welcome to What the Fundraising.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I am really excited to have this conversation with you. We met on LinkedIn, and where I watched you comment on a post with just so much curiosity and openness and this mindset that I was really inspired by. And I wanted the opportunity to sort of interview you and talk through your journey as an ED and sort of what has allowed you to be the leader that you are today. And so we're going to get into all of that, but why don't you just introduce yourself to everyone, tell everyone sort of what brings you to our conversation, and then we'll get into it.
Sure. My name is Lauren Isbell. I say I've been living the nonprofit life since girlhood, if you count slinging Girl Scout cookies. I kind of grew up around nonprofits and partnering with nonprofits on service projects and things as a kid, and was always kind of interested in that, and got my first job as a grant writer and pivoted in and out of different spaces in the nonprofit sector until a cause showed up in my living room in 2017. My daughter was born with a rare skin condition called congenital melanocytic nevi. It's okay if you haven't heard of it. It only affects about 1 in 500,000 people. And through our journey, through finding her care team and finding organizations that support patients like her, I landed as their sole staff and solo executive director. I was their third ED in the tenure of the organization in 2019. So since then, have been kind of stepping into that leadership role and learning more about what it means to lead a nonprofit and what it means to show up in the sector as someone that really cares about people protecting their mindset and how that affects the work that we do in and day out as we build our organizations.
And you had a little bit of a similar like story arc to mine. And so I'd love for you to just share that with folks, like what it was like at the beginning, becoming an ED without a roadmap, and what some of your kind of like initial learning journey was that moved you into becoming the leader that you are today.
Yeah, I became ED in June of 2019. So I had barely gotten my feet wet, and the pandemic happened. And so that was a challenge. But also, I moved from a large, and I think this might happen a lot, especially in your first organization to be an ED. I moved from a larger organization where I reported to the CEO, was on the leadership team. We were like $4 or $5 million annual budget at the time, a fairly large nonprofit for the area that I'm from, to I'm showing up in my living room every day, trying to figure out how to work from home before it was cool, trying to, manage all that came with the pandemic in just a very short period of time. And so that was a challenge, to say the least. I have 4 kids. So we went from them getting on the bus and going to school every day to mandatory homeschooling. And then my middle daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So that was just a huge curveball that no one saw coming. So it was a rough couple of years coming on and just having lots of life adjustments that were outside the scope of job, but then also thinking about what do you do as a team of one when from everything from putting transactions in QuickBooks to posting on social media when I think about it, to trying to just manage the day-to-day operations of a patient advocacy organization. I feel like I had my work cut out for me.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that is quite the combination of challenges. And so it sounds like you kind of like hit this moment, maybe as all of those things were coming together, where you were like, I can't keep doing it the way I've been doing it. Like if I keep going, spinning all these plates in the ways that I am, like this isn't going to work either for me or for the organization. And then that sort of started you on a journey of shifting things both inside of you and inside of the organization. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so by the time I was about a year and a half in, my board was like, okay, this isn't good. We need to support her more intentionally with leadership development or whatever that looks like. So my board chair at the time started meeting with me. We're going through John Maxwell, just talking about leadership at a really high level. And then he gets diagnosed with cancer and dies maybe, I guess, 4 months later. And during his kind of final time, I say we have this like Tuesday with Maury experience. I'm meeting with him every week online. We're going through leadership stuff. And at one of our last conversations together, he tells me, he says, Lauren, you're a storyteller. Like, that's who you are. That's how you show up in the world. Like, just tell the damn story. Just do it. Tell it to anybody who will listen. So I know it was just a really impactful moment. But then at the same time, I was like, well, how the heck do I do that when I feel like I'm so buried in all the things I'm not good at that I couldn't do the things that I really felt like I was born to do? And so, and just the overall realization that almost 2 years into this role at this point, and we're not growing as an organization. We're just kind of treading water and really only getting marginally ahead because I'm the only person on the payroll. Our overhead is quite low. And so anyway, just started reaching out to additional board members. They stepped in and said, let's make a plan. And so we called a gentleman who had been a long-term time donor of our organization, who was a CFRE, and said, what do we do? And so he invited us to come to a training. We came to the training. We walked away from the training realizing how much of a gap there was between like being ready for a major gifts campaign and like where we were. It's like we needed like sustainable systems that weren't sitting down. We weren't even on a path where we could like sit down and have meaningful conversations with donors about what would create synergy with them. It was really like, what are the systems we need between where we are and what the picture that he is painting? And so that was my challenge. And our organization ended up taking a fraction. I read an article in Forbes magazine. It was kind of 2021, 2022, and it was called The Future is Fractional. And I was like, fractional. Like, I can't afford someone full time to come in and do QuickBooks, but like maybe I could find a contractor who's like servicing lots of clients. So we started with that because I was terrible at the QuickBook. I didn't need to be doing our P&L. Like, that was somebody else needed to be doing that. And so I started there. And then from there, it was like, okay, well, now let's see if I can find someone to help me wrangle this social media stuff because it's sucking too much of my time because I'm not good at it. I mean, I can do it, but someone else that's their wheelhouse. So that's exactly the model we took. And we just kept taking all these little pieces and like starting everyone out at 10 hours a week, like the smallest contract I could get them to agree to, just to like give me some breathing room to think about fundraising in a way that's either like, do this fundraising thing because your organization deserves it. And that's what's going to be able to drive the initiatives that you really want to do forward. But it was kind of like, I've got to either free my time up to do that or just get out of the way and let somebody else build a system that's better. And so with that, it really started snowballing into like getting the things that were sucking up all my time that I wasn't great at. And then learning the craft of philanthropy, getting on LinkedIn, figuring out who the voices were in the room that were worth listening to and could meet me where I am. I started listening to a ton of podcasts and just reading anything I could get my hands on about fundraising. And to say that just those incremental learnings that I feel like in so many ways I'm still getting started, but like it's working. So it's fun to be on the journey where you feel like what you're doing is aligned with something that you really enjoy.
Yeah. Well, and you've had some pretty tremendous success. Like, I think what I was really blown away by for you was, I'm trying to remember exactly the post where we got connected, but you had shared basically like a win or sort of a growth metric around your donor base. And it was sort of in the midst of a lot of folks saying the opposite about kind of what had been happening for them. And I think I responded to you like, wait, like, how did you do this? Like, tell me more about this. And then you said that piece around sort of incremental change and just trying the next thing and being open-minded to something being different or curious about something over here. And then I feel like so often and I'll let you share a little bit more about the results in a second, but I feel like so often when we are looking for big results, we think the change has to be big, right? We're like, oh, if I want to double or if I want to 5x in size, the change needs to be as like, we have to do this 180. And you sort of proved what we actually know to be true about change, which is that these 1 degree shifts, these little things over time, they add up, they snowball, they build momentum. So talk to us about all that.
Yeah, so I think when you and I were connecting, it was around Giving Tuesday, and a lot of people in the nonprofit industry are kind of like, is Giving Tuesday worth it? Has it like peaked? Are we done with it? What's going on? And in my experience, I went from, I think in 2022, we had kind of always combined Giving Tuesday with like our year end, and we hadn't really done a specific call out on Giving Tuesday. And my 2023 number, I think, was like $8,000. The first time that I actually tried to send out some emails and like do something specific on Giving Tuesday, we raised about $8,000. And then in 2023, we got a little bit bigger. I think we were up to like 11. And then just learning like what a strong appeal looks like, learning how to do email marketing better, putting all those pieces in motion for a full scale campaign, we were able to do about 30,000 this year, which, I mean, to me, one of the beautiful things about Nevus Outreach is if you're connected to this condition, you really care about it. So I don't have to try to constantly sell new people. It's just my core supporters show up. And as they've been cultivated better and more intentionally and kept informed of the impact that their gifts are making more intentionally, it's just been incredible to see the kind of support that has came out from our group and the other support that we've been able to attract as a result of that. And I just think that that's where the wheel starts turning, right? Like you have to put those basic tenets in motion for a period of time. It's not fast. And I think a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I sent out 10 emails and I, only did this or that. And it's really about honing that craft and perfecting it over time. And I can't wait to see what we do. And I mean, we're already thinking about different themings and ideas for 2025, and trying to stay out in front is something that I could not possibly do when I was just the person doing all the things. And so now it's really neat to have a whole plan for the whole year kind of already on paper and starting to think about how all these different campaigns fit together to help us hit our goals.
Okay, so I love hearing this story for so many different reasons, but I'm curious. I have to believe there were moments throughout all of this where you had doubt or maybe didn't feel as optimistic as you do today. Like hearing you say, like, I can't wait to see what we do next year. I like, that's like my deepest hope for fundraisers is that they feel that way about fundraising, that type of excitement and engagement. And I can imagine for a lot of people hearing this right now, especially sort of the moment that we're in, that level of kind of like optimism and excitement might feel really far away. And so I'm just sort of curious for you, like how mentally did you, like what was some of the self-coaching that you did around that time, or just knowing that it's not linear once we start to change our mindset, it doesn't mean that we always feel positive about things. And I always want to kind of dispel that belief.
I will say that I'm an eternal optimist. Optimistic to a fault, Enneagram 7 the whole way. Like, it's going to be better tomorrow. It's fine. However, I will say that there have been plenty of times where the struggle is real. You know what I mean? And especially, I think about big decisions where at the end of 2022, so when we got back from that CFRE meeting where we were kind of having a shift in saw what was possible, maybe on down the road, one of the things they told us is you have a 1999 clip art logo. Like, your website is heavy and hard and awful. And so you should really think about what all that looks like. And so I went to the board and said, I think we need to spend some money on a rebrand, a refresh, a new website. And for a small nonprofit, like that's a big investment to say, okay, I'm going to spend $15,000 or $20,000 on. Some people might not say matters at all. And so, I mean, I cried like the whole week of that board meeting. I was so nervous, and I just was like, I don't know if this is the right decision because, I mean, I treat this cause is so close to me. Like, I treat every dollar like it's my own. Like, I'm so cognizant of the moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas that put their hard-earned money for our disposal. And I want to just never take that for granted for a second. And sorry, I didn't expect to get emotional, but it's just like a big ask like that was a lot of pressure for me. And of course, the board, gave it some thought and pushed back a little bit, and we had to revisit. do some different things. But when the time was right, the time was right. And we did move forward with that. And I'm so grateful that we did. And I felt like it brought much needed new energy and different things. And I'm not saying that the solution to all your fundraising problems is a new logo. Like, that's certainly not it. But at the same time, like, I think that having a brand that people can see, and I remember listening to a podcast and hearing someone say, you want it to have the McDonald's effect. You want it to show up on someone's email or in their mailbox, and like they know that's something from you. And we just didn't really have that before. And so I don't know, it's been really fun to lean into that more creative, more fun brand identity that we have today. But that was a big conversation that I was just so nervous about. I can think of several goals that I set in 2023 that like I just didn't know enough. I was saying, oh, I can mail out an appeal and I'm going to get $10,000. And then I would mail out the appeal and I would get $4,000 or whatever. And so there was just lots of trial and error about getting it right. I will say, went to the library and just read everything I could read and have really tried to be a student of other people who have done this. And I think that's a big thing too. Like, no one is born knowing how to do all these things related to fundraising. And even still, like, my development team is me and ED, who's involved in a lot of different things across the organization, and one 10-hour a week development coordinator, and then, a fractional Marcom support. She's pretty close to full time now, but but she does all of our social media, does blogs and all the, website, all the things. So this still tiny team is churning out a lot of information. And I don't know, it's been interesting to watch the evolution. And now I'm like, we put out an appeal and it's so beautiful. And I just love, different elements that you see that we've been able to incorporate and things. And it's just really cool to say, oh man, to look back at the ones from, 2 or 3 years ago, I'm like, no wonder that was only raising $4,000. But when you know better, you do better.
Oh my goodness. I had a donor she's a very good friend of mine now. And, but she was the largest donor at one of the last organizations that I ran. And we became friends through kind of doing community work together. And then she ultimately became a donor, and she must have been cleaning out her office. She found like old printout flyers of like my organization that I had given her some folder. I was like, oh my God, these should be burned. But yeah, one of the things I appreciate about everything that you said is like that the relationship between finding the people that you felt like you needed to learn from, right? Like really doing that learning, but also being prepared to test and iterate. I feel like sometimes when we're too, like, it's that combination that I think is really special, because I do think it's great to learn like best practices and to learn from people in this space. And it always feels so hard, like, especially sitting on the other side sometimes, of being like, well, this answer that I'm giving right now is so different for every type of organization based on capacity, skill set, who your donors are. And it's never one size fits all. And so I think for like one of the takeaways I hope folks take from this is like yes, like find your people, find the voices, find the knowledge that are really going to help you think differently and try different things. And then also still be ready that something that worked really well for somebody else might not work for you. And that's how you're going to learn, and you're going to iterate, and you're going to grow.
Absolutely. And I can think of one of the biggest challenges with that was when I first was learning about direct response appeals. And I was like, okay, so I'm supposed to like give them like dynamic paragraphs, and like all this stuff felt like so hard. I was like, how do I even do that? Or response cards that are individualized to each person. Like, and I know I'm sending out a small number compared to a lot of shops. Like, my 2,000 feels huge to me, and that's a drop in the bucket for some people. But I was like, how do you even do that? Like, what does mechanically that look like? Like, everyone was telling you to do it, but no one said, okay, you have to go to Excel and you have to do this and you have to do that. So it took getting in a group of people regularly. I joined Rachel Muir's mastermind fundraising elite coaching. So I started doing that. And in that setting, I could watch people, like, they would send videos of like, okay, here's how I like went to Excel and downloaded my reports and once it's here, you can do this to put merge. I learned the other day how to put merge fields in Canva. I didn't know that was a thing you could do in Canva, but you can. And so I'm still, all the time learning, but it took being in a group setting like that where I could learn the mechanics and not just, okay, like the best direct response person in the world says, make this as personalized as you can. But then, like, how do you do that exactly? So I think that there's space for all different types of learning and just being open to, like, you're not going to learn everything on a podcast or a book or whatever. Sometimes you're going to have to get shoulder with other people who are doing the work. And that kind of goes back to your other point about just having in those low points when you have to talk yourself out of not quitting, then, I mean, you have to have somebody you can pick up the phone. I have a girlfriend that works in the development office at a medical school not far from here. And I would pick up the phone regularly and be like, okay, talk me off a ledge. You know what I mean? And that's just as important as being willing to sit down on your lunch break and instead of really taking a lunch break, like try to learn something on a podcast on your lunch break, or whatever. So I don't know. I think that there's opportunity and there's so much information out there these days. And I feel like half the battle to me now is not getting overwhelmed by like, oh, all the things I'm not doing yet.
Yes. Well, that triage of like, do I really need to do this because it's solving a problem that I'm currently experiencing and want to address versus am I wanting to do this because everybody on LinkedIn is telling me I should be doing this. And so now I'm doubting that I'm a good fundraiser unless I do this thing, right? Like, I think that's why it's so important to really be like problem sort of centric as you're figuring out fundraising strategies, that they're really rooted in the challenge that you're experiencing and the capacity that you have to address that challenge and all of those things. Yeah, I totally appreciate that. Okay, can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
I think it's so meaningful to me that you got a little bit choked up when you were talking about the pressure of that moment. And I cry on this podcast all the time and pretty much everywhere that I am publicly. But what I'm always thinking about is just like the heaviness of the pressure that's on fundraisers and nonprofit leaders and like the interconnection of that pressure, right? The pressure to steward funds that honor the folks who give, the pressure to support the beneficiaries and the folks who need our services, and the pressure to keep all of our staff employed and paid and all of those things. And just like the weight of all of that is like so much. And I think it just makes such perfect sense that it creates like tenderness in us, right? Where it feels really emotional because it's really stressful. And I guess I'm curious, like, if there has been anything else, any sort of tools that you've used or strategies that you've had, because that pressure can also be really paralyzing. And maybe it's a mix of your like eternal optimism, but to me, there's like something here around how you haven't let it crush you, even though it sounds like it's really big, but how you let it be there and not hold you back from being able to take action or move forward.
Yeah, I think a big piece for me personally, and I know this isn't going to translate universally, but because I am so connected to the cause and a lot of our fractional support that we've hired over the last couple of years are also connected, it's almost amplified because in maybe not even a great way because we care about the cause so much too. You know what I mean? So there's this, whenever I was working at other nonprofit jobs, not that I didn't care about what was happening and how the organization showed up and was perceived and hit our goal, achieved our goals or whatever. It's a little bit different when the organization exists to support people like you through a journey. And it's a double-sided coin always, because on one hand, that creates this like passion fuel, as passion fuel. I love that term, but like you're super passionate about it. So it just like kind of sometimes gives you rocket fuel, but then you're super passionate about it. So sometimes it can really zap you towards burnout. And I think honestly, when I think about the things that have centered me time and time again, it's been my board, which I feel like is 90% of the board comments in the nonprofit sector are negative, but I will put mine against anyone out there They are such an incredibly encouraging, in the trenches with you every step of the way. I shared about my board chair that passed away, the incoming chair after him. There were days where she probably should have fired me because I did not know what I was doing and I was still working through that iterative process, but she stuck with me, and it was like her part-time job mid-pandemic to like help me figure this out. And she did. And then the leadership behind her have continued to just say, okay, Lauren, like, we're with you. We see where you're going, and we're behind you with strategy. We're behind you with support, and we're behind you with whatever you need to take this organization on the path that we've charted for it. And I think that that's really powerful too, is having that support system in the board. And I just feel like it can't be understated how important that is. But I know I've lived to tell the tale that I know that that's not how it is in probably most nonprofit. So I really do think even if that support can't come from your board, find it from somewhere. And I don't care if it's a group of girlfriends that you meet for coffee every Tuesday or whatever, like that can be just as impactful, but you have to have a place to land, and it has to be a soft place, because there are going to be days where it's hard, and you're going to have somebody that you've got to call and say, oh, this did not go well today. Let me tell you about the lesson I learned.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. And the other thing I sort of want to highlight for folks that I'm hearing in here is that Lynn Twist has this great quote, what you appreciate, appreciate. And I know that boards can be a real challenge. And you're right, we mostly hear a lot of really negative comments about it. And my guess is you've still had plenty of challenges with your board. It sounds like even in the logo conversation, right? But I think your appreciation for them is probably growing the parts of the board that are working, and that's also in those small moments and positive reinforcement and all of those things, building the board the way that you want it to be, and helping them show up the way that you want them to be. Okay, I know that we're over in time. I'm so grateful for this conversation. Where can folks go to connect with you, learn more about your organization? Thank you.
Sure. My organization URL is nevus.org, nevus.org, Nevus, like your knee. And then also you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem. Happy to do it.